Welcome back to another video. My name is Kaylee. I use this channel to talk about what intentional living looks like for me and ways that I try to be intentional in my life. So if you would like to learn some new ways that you can be intentional in yours, keep watching. I come to you in this intro a couple of days after all of the footage that you're going to see. So once or twice a month, I try and do kind of a meal prep, a bulk cook, if you will, to set us up well for the rest of the month and the months coming. If we don't run out of the things in the month, I make them. So this past weekend, Saturday specifically, and a little bit on Sunday, I did a ton of work in the kitchen. So much so that one, I got quite dehydrated because I was forgetting to drink water. And two, I should have worn like compression socks and nice, thick, comfy shoes. But instead I was in my slippers all day, and I went and saw my physical therapist to help correct some of that after. And then on Sunday, I just finished up some of the things that I didn't get done on Saturday. So the main focus of my time was really spent on baking, specifically sourdough. I'm gonna talk more about my sourdough kind of journey, but Cecil and I are doing great. Cecil is the name of my sourdough starter. My husband likes to call what I bake with him, like that I'm baking with Cecil's poop, because essentially that's kind of what discard is for sourdough. So you see Cecil get a lot of action in this video. So if you'd like to see what a bulk meal prep and kind of bulk baking looks like for me and my husband, then keep watching this video, and I hope that if you find it helpful or if you find it interesting, please let me know in the comments down below and subscribe if you're not already. Let's get cooking. So jumping into the thing that is going to take the longest is making sourdough. I said in a couple videos back that I made my own bread since 2023, and that it was just an artisan loaf with flour, salt, and water with yeast, and that I had not jumped into sourdough because I was very intimidated. Literally 2 weeks later, I had someone gift me a sourdough starter. This starter is over 100 years old. And honestly, I think that that's the only reason that I am as successful as I am with it. Because if I had started it from scratch, one, there would have been so much waste because I would have been very timid when it came to baking with it. And number two, it would have taken so much longer to get off the ground. But a 100-year-old starter, he is happy all the time. I have baked a good bit with him over the last 2 weeks, and today we are baking a lot. Right now I'm doing the prep for 2 round loaves. We're also working on a sandwich loaf and some bagels later on, and then I also made some cookies on Sunday with sourdough discard. Sourdough is something that is super intimidating to me, even though I have baked with it now and baked various different things and cooked various different things with it. With it, I've made granola, pancakes, cookies, loaves, and I'm sure some other things that I'm not thinking of right now. And it has been very fun. It is exhausting and it takes a lot of time. However, it is so fulfilling at the end of the day or the next morning when you bake the loaf and then you have fresh sourdough bread for the rest of the week. I like to bake 2 loaves at a time because I'll use one during the week and then freeze one. Today I'm actually going to make a cinnamon sugar loaf and a regular loaf because I already have a loaf in the freezer that I'm going to use throughout the week. Working with dough and making your own bread is such a way to kind of force yourself into living really intentionally because it needs attention and it needs care and it needs you to keep it alive and do very specific things to make the outcome the best that it can be. So even though this is exhausting, it really is, to bake all of these things, it actually feels really good and really aligned. And the sourdough is also better on your body than yeast. And I do have not an intolerance to gluten, but if I eat too much gluten, I do notice that I have more joint pain, and I notice less of that with sourdough than I do with regular yeast and flour. When it comes to making sourdough, like the sourdough sandwich loaf, this is actually something that I probably won't eat, but Jonathan will, because I don't love a sweet bread. But I will say something that has completely changed my life, because I've always been really good at cooking, but I have been horrible at baking. And since being introduced to sourdough only 2 weeks ago at the time that I'm recording this, baking by weight, so like using a scale and measuring by grams versus measuring cups and tablespoons and things like that, has completely changed the game for how competent I feel at baking. So I'm very grateful to my sourdough for getting me into using weight to bake. Something else that I make myself, and I have since 2023. There was a lot of changes in 2023, and I am planning to put out a video that talks more in depth about that. However, another thing has been vegetable stock. So since I stopped eating meat, also in 2023, we've had a lot more fresh veggies and vegetable scraps. Composting in our area isn't really a thing unless you do it for yourself, but we don't have a garden or any place to use a compost. So I was trying to find an alternative way to use my vegetable scraps because I had a lot. I found that I could make my own vegetable stock from my vegetable scraps, the skins of onions and garlic. You can use scallions and cilantro stems, mushrooms, tomatoes, really anything. And I don't have a recipe for this. I just freeze vegetable scraps until I have roughly 6 cups of scraps, and then I add 12 cups of water and let it simmer for an hour. And then you've got vegetable stock. Highly recommend. I know a lot of people also make their own bone broth. So if you do eat meat and you want like a chicken or a beef stock, it's really simple to make. And typically it comes from things that you're using anyways. I am in no way a zero waste kitchen, but I do try to eliminate as much waste as possible. At least I try to also use the scraps, as in boil them, make stock before throwing them away. This is a recipe that I saw recently, and I thought that it would be really great to use so that I could freeze these meatballs. So they're black bean meatballs with some oats and breadcrumbs and harissa paste, onion, garlic. Listen, I borrowed this food processor from my mom. It's a kitchen gadget that I don't use often, and so we don't own it. And it was very evident that we are not used to using a food processor. We had so many issues with this thing. First, by me completely overfilling it, and then not knowing how to get it off the base. But it worked. It did what we needed it to do. It will be going straight back to my mom's house because I don't often make recipes that need a food processor. This was just much easier to blend together the meatballs and the tomatoes and jalapenos for the black beans. Even though if I didn't have the food processor for the black beans, I would have just grated the tomatoes and finely chopped the jalapenos. So pretty much all of these are going to be going in the freezer because when I don't feel like cooking, but I choose to cook anyways, pasta is my go-to meal. So this is a really easy way to add some vegetable and protein without adding too much work if I'm already not wanting to cook. So pulling a couple of these out of the freezer, heating them in the pan, and then adding our pasta sauce. And pasta creates a much healthier, more filling meal, more so than just pasta and sauce. This is a recipe from Madeline Olivia. I believe she has a cookbook out, but I got it off of her YouTube channel. So I will leave the video where this recipe is linked down below. So this is my second time ever attempting bagels. The first time was such a fail. It was one of those 3-ingredient bagels, but this is my first time attempting them with sourdough discard, and I've got to say they turned out really well. So I have a shoulder injury from a car accident about a year ago, and so the hand kneading, because we don't have a stand mixer, was taking me out. So you will probably see my arm switch to my husband's because he had to step in and help me knead the dough for the bagels, because especially after mixing and shaping the sourdough loaves, my shoulder was completely out of commission. Bagels are something that I have been purchasing, but I do want to make as much from scratch as possible, and these only take about 4 hours, which is much easier than the sourdough loaves, and so I can do them more times throughout the week if needed without having to be in the kitchen all day or the timer running my life. The next two things that I'm going to make are a lentil bolognese and Mexican beans, Mexican black beans. The lentil bolognese is again just kind of another protein-packed sauce to have at the ready, especially for how long lentils take to cook. This provides a really good filling meal that I can just pull out of the freezer and boil some pasta and add it to that. So the entire amount of this sauce will be going into the freezer. I am using pre-minced garlic. I know, I am committing a cardinal sin and I am aware of it. However, this is so much easier for me, and I may go back to garlic cloves eventually. However, right now, for the amount that I'm cooking and the amount that I would need to purchase, this is so much easier for me. So don't judge me too harshly. This is a recipe I got from Rainbow Plant Life, so I will also link that down in the description. I'll actually probably just link all of the recipes down in the description so that you can find them and use them if you would like to. So now I'm gonna make some Mexican black beans. This is another recipe that I have found. We love burrito bowls. It's truly one of my favorite things to make, and it's something that always comes up as an option when we're getting something out. However, we are often disappointed by getting a burrito bowl out and about, whether that's Moe's or Chipotle. Almost every time, some component of the bowl is disappointing. So if you want consistency with your food, it's best to make it at home. This is the first time I'm making my black beans like this. I do typically add some additional seasonings to them and kind of simmer them down, but this time we're adding a lot of seasoning. We're adding tomatoes and onion and jalapenos and garlic, plus some additional seasonings. These were delicious. We did have them for dinner this night and Sunday for lunch, and some of the best black beans I have made. Now I will say, for after the meal that we ate of these, I did add some adobo to the beans that I was freezing and putting in the fridge because I felt like it needed a little bit more enhancement of flavor. But these are delicious. And again, I made a double batch so that I could freeze some and that we could have at least 2 meals over the weekend. I have been cooking since I was probably 6, maybe 7. My mom sold Pampered Chef when I was younger, and so she was always getting ready for a show, and I remember I was always incredibly interested in all of the Pampered Chef gadgets and the different recipes and seasonings that were very specific to that brand. And because of that, being in the kitchen is very relaxing for me when I can choose to be in the kitchen. And so doing prep like this is really helpful because the times that I don't have the energy to be in the kitchen, I can still have a really delicious home-cooked meal that's available to us rather than feeling like we have to grab something from a fast food place or have a bit of a mediocre meal at home. Cooking is something that I feel really good at. I know what flavors work well together, what flavors don't. And so it's something that I do love to do and want to do as much as possible month to month. In editing, we realized I didn't film an outro, so I'm coming to you many days later, probably almost 2 weeks later, from filming that video. And I thought with my outro, I would give a little bit of feedback on some of the recipes. So first, I boiled my bagels for too long. I boiled them 1 minute each side. It should be more like 20 to 30 seconds. They were the texture was a little off. Let's just say it that way. The Mexican beans, fantastic. Still have some in the freezer that I'm looking forward to eating next week. The lentil bolognese I haven't tried yet, but I did try the sauce the day that I made it and it tasted delicious. The red wine really added a lot of depth of flavor to that dish. The black bean meatballs were a little bit of a disappointment. I hated the texture of them. I think it was too much oat and too much breadcrumb to the bean and onion and garlic ratio. However, after trying to power through a couple of the meatballs and just power through the texture, I wondered if I could kind of break up the meatball and do it kind of like a minced meat or ground meat substitute, and that tasted so much better. So much better. I also realized when we were editing this that I forgot to add salt and pepper to the meatballs. So the texture was off anyways, and they were a little bit bland. So once I kind of ground them up and fried the little pieces up in a pan, I added some salt and pepper and then added them to my pasta. Because the pieces are so small, and I mean, it's not meat, so it's not really holding itself together. I did put this on top of pasta that was already tossed with sauce instead of tossing the sauce with the minced meat mixture that I created from the meatballs. And I will probably continue making those meatballs just so I can store them easier and I can freeze them, take them out, thaw them, break them all up, and then cook them down in a pan. Very good. Highly recommend that if the texture of the meatballs is off for you. Still loving all things sourdough. And I actually have some friends coming over for a brunch this coming weekend, and I'm going to make sourdough discard pancakes for them. So I'm looking forward to that. But that wraps up the end of this video. Thanks so much for coming along with me as I kind of prepped a bunch of food for this month and next month. Until next time.